Alright, we're going to look at 19B now, Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor. Before we do, let's look at this. The student will identify the origins. We did that. Major developments. We talked about A. Philip Randolph in the last video. And it says, and the domestic impact of World War II. Domestic impact of World War II is going to play out in the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The result of that being the internment of Japanese in America. So let's go to that developments during World War I, and this is going to happen at home domestically. Okay, so 19B says explain the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and the internment of Japanese Americans, German Americans, and Italian Americans. We can't forget those. Okay, all right. So we're going to look at the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Japanese internment, and as well as German and Italian internment. And here we go. Here's the language of the standards. Here's our elements. Domestic impact of World War II is the theme. Alright, we talked about Japanese expansionist policies as being a cause of World War II. These policies about expanding into the Pacific what's going to cause the United States to leave isolationism and neutrality and eventually join the war. And here's Hawaii, in 1897, I believe it was Hawaii, or 1898, I can't remember, 1898, July 7th, 1898. Hawaii became part of the United States, and Pearl Harbor was a naval base we built there so our Navy could get across this great expansive Pacific Ocean. And it's the Japanese that are going to come there and attack us without our notice. And it's surprise attacks what's going to cause the United States into World War I. Let's talk about a minute, and I know this is world history stuff, but we're going to do it anyway. What leads up to this? And let's look at this. The Great Depression the Great Depression is going to cause Japan to hurt economically, just like it did every other country. But in response to that, this group of expansionists in Japan are going to lead Japan to invade Manchuria and northern China, and then occupy China, and then occupy Indochina, which is today Vietnam. And we looked at a map of that a few moments ago. The United States is going to impose embargo. In other words, they're going to refuse to sell to Japan scrap iron and gas that is vital to that country for expansion. So we refused to do that. That was a sanction we did economically, and usually following a sanction like this is usually a declaration of war. But what happens is the United States imposes this embargo on these oil and gas products and iron products, and then Japan gets upset about it because they feel like it is a declaration of war, even though it wasn't. It's just a sanction saying we didn't agree with their occupation of Manchuria, China, and Indochina. So Japan attacks Pearl Harbor in response. And let's look at this map here we showed a few moments ago. Here's Manchuria, there's Korea, there's China, northern China, and here's French Indochina or Vietnam down here, and here's the Philippines. Actually, they took over. And so we see that here's the Hawaiian Islands here. Here's Pearl Harbor, indicating where it is. And Hawaii and Pearl Harbor are in the Pacific Ocean, out here in the Pacific Ocean. Here's Midway. We're about to talk about Midway in just a few moments. And there's not much distance between Hawaii Islands and Midway. I guess if you had to swim it, there would be. But anyway, they're nearby. But here's the expansion of Japan, and all of a sudden Japan goes beyond that and attacks Hawaii. Here's a different looking map here. We're going to talk about Midway in a few moments. Here's Hawaii. Here's Honolulu here, and it's on Honolulu, Oahu Island there, that Pearl Harbor is right in here. Honolulu. And it's there where the Japanese do a surprise attack of our Navy vessels that are there, and it's going to destroy and damage the Navy there. And after they do this, on December 7, 1941, President FDR asked for a declaration of war. Let's listen to his request.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
So that's the first part of his declaration for war. He's asking Congress, and here's the last part.
I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
And it's after this declaration of war that FDR issues Executive Order 9066 in retaliation. And Executive Order 9066 takes all Japanese within the United States and puts them in internment camps. Okay, Japanese Americans, these are Americans in the United States who are of Japanese descent. And here are some of the locations of those internment camps. Most of them in the West, out near California. There were some in Arkansas. And here's a cartoon showing the general idea of why they did it. There's a map: California, Oregon, Washington here on the West Coast. And it shows all these Japanese people lining up. And this is Dr. Seuss, by the way. And then it shows this guy here with looking at through this looking glass, he's waiting for the signal from home. And this Japanese guy is handing out TNT or bombs so the Japanese here could use to get into war effort against the United States. That was the idea and the fear behind the Japanese here living on the West Coast, and that's why Executive Order 9066 was given by FDR. And so we look on this today and look back and we're ashamed of it, but at the time this fear and hysteria of Japan attacking the United States and Japanese Americans here helping them there was a lot of fear there. But anyway, here's some of the internment camp buildings here. Just wanted to show you a few pictures. So here's some Japanese that were interned here, sitting at these long tables eating. Here's some heading there, and these Japanese had to leave their businesses, they had to leave their homes, and they lost a lot of property while being interned during World War II. So they lost a lot by being removed and relocated to these places. And there's another camp there showing the mountains where they were located. Here's another where families eating. A guy by the name of Fred Korematsu, Japanese American, he fights it in court that he feels like it's a violation of due process of law for Japanese Americans to be relocated and put in internment camps. The Supreme Court at the time is going to rule against Korematsu and stating that the U.S. government was under attack and that it was justified in relocating them. In other words, they're going to use the suspension of habeas corpus, or the ability of the president to suspend habeas corpus for certain groups during an invasion of the United States, and Pearl Harbor is considered an invasion. Now, German Americans were also interned, and some of those, like at Fort Lincoln, North Dakota up here, the Germans were interned with Japanese Americans in some of these places. But over 250,000 Germans were detained at 50 different locations. And here's some of those on the map. Here's a picture of some of the German Americans that were there, and these are in Fort Lincoln, Bismarck, North Dakota, where I just showed you on the map. Italian Americans were also interned. There's a picture of some here. Over 10,000 Italian Americans were interned during World War II. And the ones that were not interned, the Italians that were not interned, and the German Americans that were not interned, and even the Japanese that were not interned, were actually given curfews. Their things were searched. A lot of their civil liberties were violated during World War II. So at that juncture, I think we've pretty much nailed 19B, explained the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. We did that, and the internment of Japanese Americans, German Americans, and Italian Americans. If you have any questions, ask them in class. Good luck on the quiz test and the EOCT.